When Henry took the throne in 1509 at 17 years old, he was exactly what a Renaissance king was supposed to be. He was tall, athletic, fluent in multiple languages, and a champion jouster. But the reality is, he was the spare. He was originally destined for the church. Everything changed in 1502. His older brother Arthur, the boy groomed from birth for the crown, died suddenly of a sweating sickness. Overnight, a 10-year-old Henry was thrust into the role of sole heir to the throne. Looking at this royal succession tree, we can see the Tudor line hanging by a thread. Henry's father had won the crown on a battlefield, barely ending the bloody civil wars known as the Wars of the Roses. A legitimate male heir was the absolute only insurance policy against rival factions plunging England right back into chaos. To secure a powerful strategic alliance with Spain and avoid returning a massive dowry, Henry married his dead brother's widow, the Spanish princess Catherine of Aragon. For a decade and a half, the partnership actually worked. Catherine was intelligent, politically astute, and even crushed a Scottish invasion as regent while Henry was at war. But after 6 pregnancies, miscarriages, and infant deaths, they had only one surviving child, a daughter named Mary. In the 16th century, England had never been successfully ruled by a queen. In Henry's mind, a female monarch would look weak to foreign rivals and invite English lords to fight over the crown. A daughter simply didn't solve the problem. By the early 1520s, Catherine is in her late 30s and past Tudor childbearing age. The political necessity for a son begins to curdle in Henry's mind. The anxiety of a fragile dynasty morphs into a consuming, radical obsession to find a new wife. Enter Anne Boleyn. She is sharp-witted, sophisticated, and refuses to become just another royal mistress. She demands marriage. To give her that, Henry needs the Pope to grant an annulment, a legal declaration that his marriage to Catherine was never valid in the first place. This map of 16th century Europe illustrates the geopolitical roadblock Henry hit. The Pope was essentially a prisoner in Rome, surrounded by the forces of Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor. Because Charles was Catherine of Aragon's nephew, the Pope could not grant Henry the annulment without enraging the most powerful military force on the continent. Blocked by European politics, Henry escalates. He severs England from Rome, breaking 1,000 years of Catholic tradition, and declares himself the supreme head of a newly formed Church of England. The ruthless architect of this massive legal and religious separation is Henry's chief minister, Thomas Cromwell. He provides the legal framework that makes Henry's word absolute law. Henry marries Anne Boleyn in secret in 1533. She is already pregnant. Henry has isolated his country and torn up its religious foundations, betting entirely on this child being a boy. Instead, Anne gives birth to a daughter, Elizabeth. Following a series of miscarriages, Henry decides this marriage is cursed too. Cromwell builds a monstrous, physically impossible case of treason and adultery against Anne. Barely 3 years after her coronation, she is sent to the block to meet a French executioner's sword. 11 days later, Henry marries the quiet, submissive Jane Seymour. In 1537, she finally delivers the ultimate prize, a male heir, Edward. But the victory is brief. 12 days after giving birth, Jane dies of a postpartum infection. Henry finally has his son, but the psychological cost of securing him has fractured the king. The charismatic, athletic prince of 1509 is gone, replaced entirely by a paranoid tyrant who realizes he can kill and discard anyone in his path. By 1540, Henry is 46, massively obese, and suffering from a rotting leg ulcer that causes constant pain. Cromwell arranges a political marriage with a German princess, Anne of Cleves, based on a flattering portrait. When she arrives, Henry finds her physically repulsive. The marriage is a disaster, but Anne executes a brilliant survival strategy. When Henry asks for an annulment, she immediately agrees. She walks away with castles, a massive income, and her life. Thomas Cromwell, blamed for the mismatch, is beheaded. On the very day Cromwell dies, the nearly 50-year-old king marries the teenage Catherine Howard. She is young, neglected by her guardians, and reckless. Within months of the wedding, she begins a secret affair with a courtier. When the evidence is handed to him, Henry weeps with humiliation and rage. Parliament passes a bill declaring Catherine guilty without a formal trial. She is executed before she even turns 20. Henry's final wife, Catherine Parr, is less a romantic conquest and more a highly intelligent nurse. She knows the king is dangerous and unpredictable, so she navigates his violent mood swings by acting as a humble, submissive student to his theological rants. While managing his oozing leg wound, she pulls off a crucial political maneuver. She successfully persuades the ailing king to bring his two discarded daughters, Mary and Elizabeth, back to court and formally restore them to the line of succession. Henry dies in January 1547. He passes away completely convinced he has won the game of history. He secured absolute power, broke the church, and leaves behind a male heir to carry the Tudor dynasty forward. But Henry's grand plan collapses almost immediately. Edward, the son he sacrificed his humanity to produce, is sickly. He reigns for only 6 years before dying at age 15, leaving no heirs. The crown then falls to Mary, the daughter of Catherine of Aragon. She takes power and attempts a bloody, chaotic 5-year reversal of her father's religious reformation, burning Protestants at the stake to restore Catholicism. When Mary dies childless, the Tudor throne defaults to the absolute last option, Elizabeth, the illegitimate daughter of Anne Boleyn, the child Henry had completely ignored. Elizabeth I takes the crown and rules for 45 highly successful years. Under her command, the English Navy crushes the Spanish Armada, the economy flourishes, and England cements itself as a global superpower. She presides over an English golden age, while explicitly refusing to marry or produce an heir. She proves definitively that a woman could manage a fractured country just as effectively as a king. Henry VIII tore a nation apart, broke a millennium of church history, and destroyed 6 women in his desperate pursuit of a son. But his defining historical legacy was the very daughter he valued least.